There's something deeply captivating about the meeting of two raw, contrasting materials, wood and metal. One organic, warm and aged by nature. The other, industrial, cold and forged by fire. And when these two elements are brought together in sculpture, especially in a rustic style, the result is a harmonious clash. It's an art form that speaks to opposites, man and nature, softness and strength, past and future, all tied together in one balanced creation. Rustic metal and wood fusion sculptures are more than just art. They're a conversation between elements, a poetic juxtaposition that captures the essence of time, texture, and story. When we talk about rustic design, we're talking about authenticity, imperfection, a certain rugged honesty that doesn't hide behind polish or pretense. And that's where both wood and metal shine, especially when they're allowed to be themselves. A slab of reclaimed oak with cracks and knots, or a piece of driftwood shaped by the tides, paired with a strip of aged iron, or welded steel rods with rust still clinging to their surface. There's no need to sand down every edge or buff out every mark. In fact, the marks are what make it beautiful. They show the journey. They hold the memory of where the materials have been. These sculptures often begin with a simple idea, a silhouette, a movement, a mood. But it's the character of the materials that brings it to life. An artist might start with a salvaged wooden beam from an old barn, still bearing the wear of decades, and combine it with discarded metal tools or scraps from a workshop. The result can be abstract or representational, anything from a flowing wave made of curling metal vines emerging from a wooden base, to a striking animal form where the body is carved from timber and the limbs or wings are crafted from twisted metal. And that contrast, the softness of wood next to the rigidity of metal, is what creates the energy in each sculpture. Even when the design is simple, the dynamic between these two materials draws the eye. Your gaze moves from the grain of the wood to the texture of the metal, and back again, tracing the points where they connect, where they overlap, where one appears to grow out of the other. It's almost like watching two worlds collide peacefully. Rustic metal and wood sculptures are often more than just aesthetic objects. They feel grounded, anchored in the earth. They carry a kind of weight, not just physically but emotionally. Maybe it's because they remind us of how the world used to be. Before everything was mass-produced and digital. Before smooth plastic replaced rough timber. There's something nostalgic in these materials. A weathered wooden plank might call to mind a farmhouse porch or a forest trail. A rusted steel plate might feel like a relic from an old workshop, still echoing with the sound of hammer on anvil. The creative process behind these sculptures is often a mix of spontaneity and craftsmanship. Artists working in this style don't always start with a sketch. Sometimes they just begin with what's available, a piece of scrap metal that catches the light a certain way, or a chunk of wood with a particular shape. They turn it in their hands, look at it from every angle, and let the design evolve naturally. They might cut, weld, sand, or burnish the metal. They might carve, plane, or stain the wood. But the goal is rarely perfection. It's character. In many of these sculptures, you'll see visible welds, rough textures, uneven surfaces. That's intentional. It's all part of the rustic charm. The finished piece might look ancient and modern at the same time. Like something you might find in a forgotten field, or in a high-end gallery. That tension between natural and industrial, between rough and refined, is what makes rustic fusion sculptures so engaging. The themes of these artworks can vary widely. Some lean toward nature, trees with metal branches, birds with wooden wings, or abstract representations of landscapes. Others are more geometric and structural, layered shapes, spirals, towers, and frames. And some sculptures combine utility with artistry, becoming functional pieces like lamp stands, tables, or wall hangings that also happen to be visually stunning. But in every case, the focus is on balance. Not just visual balance but material balance. Making sure that the weight and presence of metal doesn't overpower the wood, and vice versa. The patina on both materials plays a huge role too. In rustic art, aged surfaces are celebrated. You might see oxidized copper with a greenish tinge, or corroded iron with deep oranges and reds. These natural changes in the metal become part of the sculpture's language. They speak of time. They give context. Similarly, wood might be treated to enhance its age, or left raw to darken naturally. Some artists use fire to char the surface of the wood, creating contrast in color and texture. It's a process that's both destructive and creative, burning to beautify. There's also something deeply personal about working with reclaimed materials. Many artists who create rustic metal and wood sculptures source their components from places with history. Old barns, shipyards, factories, or forest clearings. Each piece of metal or wood might come with its own story. A rusted hinge once held a door that led to a family home. A wooden beam once supported a roof that weathered decades of storms. When these pieces are reassembled into art, those stories continue, layered into something new. Viewers often respond to that authenticity. There's a tactile allure to these sculptures. You want to touch them. You want to run your fingers along the grooves in the wood, feel the cool hardness of the metal, trace the lines where the two meet. And that sensory connection deepens your appreciation. It's not just about how the sculpture looks. It's about how it feels, visually, emotionally, physically. In home decor, rustic fusion sculptures make a strong statement. They work beautifully in spaces that value raw materials, loft apartments, cabins, studios, and minimalist homes that need a grounding element. But they also hold their own in more polished environments, offering contrast and texture. A small tabletop sculpture can become a conversation piece. A large wall-mounted installation can transform an entire room. These artworks don't scream for attention, but they command presence. They settle into a space and give it soul. And because each sculpture is made from unique materials, no two are ever the same. That's part of their charm. When you own a piece, you're not just buying a decoration. You're taking home a story. A piece of wood that may have floated downriver for years. A shard of metal that once was part of a forgotten machine. And together, in the hands of an artist, they've become something beautiful, something that speaks to the past but lives fully in the present. Rustic metal and wood fusion sculptures remind us that beauty doesn't have to be pristine. It doesn't have to be perfect or polished. It can be rugged, worn, and raw. It can carry the marks of time. And in fact, it's those marks that make it meaningful. In a world that often prizes the new and shiny, these sculptures ask us to slow down, to appreciate the textures of age, to find elegance in imperfection, to embrace contrast. At their core, these works of art celebrate resilience. Wood that has stood strong against rot. Metal that has survived rust. Materials that have aged, endured, and been transformed, not erased but elevated. And that, in many ways, is the most powerful message of all. That even when something has been used, discarded, or worn down, it still holds potential. It still has a place. It can still become something extraordinary. In a world that's so quick to throw things away, whether objects, ideas, or even people, the art of rustic fusion sculpture quietly reminds us that nothing is ever truly without worth. The rough surface, the rusted edge, the weathered texture, these aren't flaws. They're features. They're stories waiting to be told, memories etched into the material itself. Rustic fusion sculpture is, at its heart, a celebration of contrast. It blends the industrial with the organic, the rigid with the fluid, the past with the present. A curved piece of driftwood might wrap around a steel rod. A jagged metal plate might rise from a smooth wooden base. And together they don't clash, they converse. They support each other. They become more powerful, more meaningful because of their differences. Just like people, just like cultures, just like ideas. It's in the blending that something new is born, something neither element could achieve alone. These sculptures don't pretend to be polished or perfect. That's part of their charm. They're not trying to hide their origin. They wear it proudly. The dents, the grains, the marks of time, they're all still visible. And that visibility is what gives the piece depth. When we look at a rustic fusion sculpture, we're not just seeing a shape. We're seeing a journey. We're seeing what the piece has been through, storms, heat, hands, history. And maybe that's why they resonate so deeply. Because we too are shaped by what we've endured. We too carry the marks of our past. And we too hope that those marks can become part of something beautiful. There's a kind of honesty in this art form that's rare. It doesn't try to be sleek or trendy. It doesn't rely on shine or symmetry. Instead, it invites the viewer to slow down, to look beyond surface, to find meaning in the imperfect, the unexpected, the overlooked. In doing so, it teaches us to value resilience, to recognize that transformation isn't always about starting fresh. It's about working with what's already there, honoring it, reshaping it, giving it a second life. So the next time you pass by a piece of scrap metal or a fallen branch, take a closer look. Imagine what it might become. See not just what it is, but what it could be. Because that's the spirit of rustic fusion sculpture. The ability to see beauty in the broken, to find art in the ordinary, and to build something timeless from the elements of time itself. It's a reminder that nothing is ever truly lost. That everything, in the right hands and with the right perspective, can become part of something meaningful. And maybe, in our own lives, we can hold on to that same vision. To not discard parts of our story just because they're difficult or imperfect, but to see how even our roughest edges have value. How they can be woven into something greater. Something honest, something whole.